Good evening. It's a couple minutes to 6. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Let's see. Would you all please join me in our pledge allegiance to the flag? Mr. Painter, will you please call the roll?
Member Lepper.
Present.
Vice Chair Keeney.
Present.
Member List. Here. Member Raines.
Here. Okay. Next item of business is to address the consent calendar. The agenda as, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Mic on if you want. And the next item of business is to adopt the meeting minutes from our last meeting, April 16th. Were there any changes or any comments on the minutes?
No.
I did notice there was a typo listing Michael Friend as vice chair, so if that could just be corrected. So can we have a motion to adopt those minutes?
I make a motion.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Actually, I'm going to abstain. I was not present for that meeting. So, number 2, no items have been pulled from the consent calendar. Item 3, items of interest to the public, public comment on items that are not on the agenda. At this time, we open up the podium to anyone here who wants to address the Planning Commission on other items that we haven't listed.
Commissioners, Kirk Smith of Placerville. I came for another matter, but since I'm here, I wanted to raise a matter of great urgency and importance, and that's the disposition of 2 buildings down the street of great historic importance for the town, and that's the Mustard and Cutcha buildings, the old City Hall. Those proposals involve 2 dramatically different approaches to how to handle that building. It is something that this body should review because it has to do with zoning matters and certainly with meeting the requirements of historic preservation, which you've discussed before related to properties that are in historic districts. The requirement the city's asked is that the proponents come up with methods that are consistent with the historic nature of the town. That's extraordinarily vague. One body has proposed taking away the old mural from the era of the Depression out of the district attorney's office, known as the post office, for those around in the 1950s. So those are major changes. The Confidence Building was a firefighting place, and that front window was open for the fire pump to come out. And one proponent wants to keep that restored so that a fire proposal for a fire museum could be in that particular location. So these are things which your body should be looking at. Now, I know that you can't pass a resolution tonight for that purpose. It's not on your agenda, and by the next time you meet, it'll already pass. But there's nothing to stop any one of you, all of you, individually to request the City Council to have it come before this body for review. We already know that there's a couple unwritten exemptions for review by the Planning Commission. One is, for example, if you're an automobile dealer that produces a tremendous amount of sales tax revenue for the city, and you say that if you don't approve our sign proposal, why the big auto company is going to take away the dealership. And nobody's going to ask for verification of that. Likewise, we remember the famous let me paint you a picture speech where the Jack Russell Brewery was told that they're going to have opening pretty soon. So if you go in and you look at the historic area issues or Planning Commission issues for zoning and construction, et cetera, sorry, we're not going to be able to open it'll cause delay. And that was amazing. And nobody's going to question it. And so that's where they were able to escape review. And I noticed that some members of the Planning Commission at that time were skeptical when one of the many representatives for the city officials here, Cleve Morris, said that you didn't even have authority to do anything about the proposed pole sign that was there. So you do have the authority because that's in your mandate to handle the historic guidelines for preservation. And those buildings are certainly part of that heritage. So I hope that individually you'll consider not advocating or allowing the city to take away your responsibility in that area. It's of great importance. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from the public at this time? Okay, I'm going to close that public comment section. Moving on to item number 4 on our agenda, communications. I want to thank Mr. Smith for distributing. I think we all got copies of the brochures for retrofits for windows. And were there any other communications that staff wanted to tell us about at this time? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 5, presentation and educational workshop session, the small cell wireless facilities presentation. I'll turn it over to you. Let's see, Mr. Rivas, you're heading that up for us tonight.
Thank you very much, members of the Planning Commission. Just to give a little brief background, on September 26th of 2018, the Federal Communications Commission adopted rules for what's called accelerating wireless and wireline broadband deployment by removing barriers to infrastructure investment. And these rules were in the form of a declaratory ruling and third report and order, references FCC 18-133, which became effective January 14th of this year. Basically, with local jurisdiction having until April 15th of 2019 to establish and publish standards regarding aesthetics. So on February 12th of 2019, the City Council adopted a resolution of intent to direct staff to proceed with amending the city code to bring its ordinance into compliance with the new FCC final rule regarding small cell wireless facility siting and the review process. So subsequent to that, staff has been working with both Verizon staff and with AT&T staff on, and also been consulting with other jurisdictions on what form or how those new regulations and standards should look like. So we were approached by Verizon, and their desire was to provide a presentation to the Planning Commission, sort of an introduction to what 5G means, what the deployment of the new infrastructure small cell facilities mean, and give you the opportunity to ask questions, also give the public an opportunity to ask questions. And with that, I'm happy to present, we have both Craig Walkenhorst and Chris Villegas with Verizon. Chris will be giving the presentation. And with that, unless the planning commissioners have any questions, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Do any commissioners have questions for staff right now? I just want to clarify that we're not going to take any action. This is for informational purposes only tonight.
That's correct. We are not asking council to take any action. This is for presentation only, just to hopefully educate both the commission and the public, as well as staff, on what 5G means as we move forward with developing our new ordinance, which will come to the commission sometime hopefully in the near future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. So my name is Chris Villegas. I work for Verizon Wireless. At Verizon Wireless, I'm part of the Community Development Department, where we focus on building relationships with the cities that we serve. So I'm here today to talk to you about Verizon Wireless's small cell 4G and 5G network upgrades in the town of Placerville. There we go. And before I get started, I just wanted to let you know that if you do have any questions throughout the course of the presentation, please feel free to interrupt. I would prefer that we have an open dialogue rather than me just presenting, So I'd like to ensure that we maximize one another's time while I'm here. And so with that, I'll get started. So before I get into small cells specifically, I wanted to cover some of the community benefits.
If I may interrupt you just briefly. Okay. Can we take care of the sound at the...
Yeah, I have a recommendation, actually. Andrew had a really good recommendation. Maybe we can have Chris sit up at the desk there, and that way he's able to face the audience, and he can face the commissioners and better field questions, and I think it'll run a little bit better instead of having the audience to his back. So if that's okay. Right. Yeah, good idea. That's great. Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Okay, I think that's better. Okay, so community benefits. So some of the community benefits that a city or a town would see with the expansion of a network from a wireless carrier would be enhanced wireless services, and that's because small cells are strategically placed closer to the end user, which ensures that voice, video, and data operates as intended. Another community benefit would be the reliability to the network, especially during time of a crisis, and this is particularly important for your first responders. So you want to ensure that the network is operating as intended, and so there's that resiliency there that first responders can rely on. Another benefit is the economic benefit, and that's because with 5G wireless technology, new markets or businesses would change the way that they currently do business. So it would allow new ways of doing things to flourish, and that's because more data would be transmitted over the network that is currently not possible with 4G wireless technology. Other benefits include Verizon's significant investment in a community as well as resiliency to the network, particularly for next generation wireless services.
Before you go on, the 4G, 5G has been thrown out there a whole lot. Can you explain the difference to us in the audience between what we know on our cell phone is the 5G and what you're talking about as 5G?
Yes. So I would imagine that you have AT&T. Is that what you're...
No, I actually have Verizon.
Okay, very good. Well, I was asking because AT&T currently uses 5GE, and that's 5G evolution, so it's not technically 5G yet. You would have to have a compatible 5G device in order to have true 5G service. Okay. And so the difference between 4G and 5G is that 4G is the internet as we know it today. That's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of the apps that we have where we're able to connect with one another. That is 4G, and those technologies would not be possible without without the wireless industry transitioning from 3G to 4G. And so very similar to that, we're transitioning now into the 5th generation of wireless, which will allow wireless carriers to transmit more data, dense, rich information over a millimeter wavelength. However, the millimeter band travels a shorter distance. And so you need more small cells strategically placed around a community, particularly where people tend to congregate, in order to ensure that data reaches the intended user.
So in the 4G and 5G you're talking about generation, not gigabyte.
Correct. It's the 5th generation wireless service.
Right, okay.
I had a question regarding resiliency. You mentioned first responders. Will all of the small cell installations have some sort of backup power, like what we have for other cell towers now?
Yeah, so the current design that we are deploying does not have backup battery. It does not. So we would have to work with the jurisdiction, and if it's something that the jurisdiction was particularly interested in, then we could work with you in that aspect, but at the same time, the backup battery would take up space on the ground. And so what we've found is that most jurisdictions don't want equipment placed on the ground. And so it becomes an issue with undergrounding of the equipment.
Is there a number of small cells that you would be aware of that we would need within the city of Placerville to provide this service?
I don't have a specific deployment plan today, but generally speaking, it would be a few hundred, and those would be phased out. So we would start with roughly 20 to 40 in phase one, and then grow from there depending on demand and need with the city or with the town.
And if they're on city property, is there fees paid to the city or?
That is correct. And so we would be negotiating, or I believe we're negotiating currently with the city in order to attach to city-owned assets.
Thank you.
Okay. So why are we expanding the network? Today more than ever, oh, sure.
Attaching to city assets, does the city get reimbursed for your use of city equipment, facilities, infrastructure? And does the city know how much they're going to get reimbursed?
Yes, so we would pay the city an annual attachment rate fee.
Such as, for example, how much?
So the current rate that's guided by the FCC is at, I believe it's $270 annually per pole.
Per pole, thank you.
Okay, so why, did you have a question? So why are we expanding the network? So today more than ever, more and more people and businesses are relying on the network, and this is placing a strain on the network. Statistics show that the average North American smartphone user will consume 48 gigabytes of data per month in 2023, which is up from just 2.5 gigabytes of data in 2016 and 7.1 gigabytes of data in 2017. Additionally, 55% of American homes are wireless only, meaning that more and more homeowners and renters are opting to cut the traditional telephone line in favor of a mobile device and a wireless network. And in North America, the average household has up to 13 connected devices, with smartphones outnumbering tablets 6 to 1. And so what this tells us is that data consumption is projected to grow exponentially, and in order to keep up with this demand, we need to expand on the existing network to ensure that our customers have a network that they can rely on.
Are these exclusive to Verizon customers?
These statistics?
The cell towers that you would install?
Yes, so these would be specific to Verizon wireless customers.
Can the installations be shared? We have cell towers now with different carriers.
So with macro towers, they are able to support multiple carriers. It would be possible to have a shared pole, but that would mean that there's more equipment on a particular pole. And so the integrity of that pole may suffer because it may not be able to support that additional loading from other carriers' equipment. There's also separation distances that need to be kept between carriers, and so that would mean that the pole would have to be extended by up to 10 feet in order to be able to support another carrier's equipment.
Does this technology allow the potential for multiple carriers on a small cell tower, or would they have to be exclusive to one carrier?
Right. Now, the way the industry is moving is each pole would be specific to each individual carrier.
Any other questions? Thank you.
So staying ahead of demand. So we need to expand the network because there's more and more data. So data consumption is growing exponentially, and more people are relying on the network. And as we move forward with new technologies, data consumption will grow. And so in order to do that, we need to expand the existing network. And so more wireless traffic needs more wireless facilities, just like a vehicle needs more lanes on the road. And so one of the ways that Verizon is doing this is that we're tapping into the 5G spectrum, or the millimeter wave band, which is allowing us to transmit more data over our signal. So we need to add more wireless antennas closer to users and closer to other cell sites to provide reliable service customers have come to expect from Verizon. And so we're doing this by deploying small cells throughout a community. Additionally, it's important to note that small cells are particularly utilized for capacity and not coverage. So a particular city may already have coverage on their cell phones, or their cell phone would show that they have full bars. But when there's a lot of people that are relying on the network, then you see capacity issues. And so this typically happens at large sporting events or festivals, places where there's a lot of people that are relying on the network, and then you're not able to send and receive text messages. Your data speeds are slower, and you're not able to place or receive phone calls. And so by adding capacity through the form of small cells in your city, you'll be able to ensure that your phone calls or your text messages or your data work seamlessly, so you don't have an issue if there were, theoretically a crisis in a city. So you would still be able to reach your first responders. You'd be able to reach your loved ones. So that's why small cells are very important.
I just want to be clear. So the capacity, this is both ways. For instance, if you are trying to use the wireless network to log in information to a remote server, this new generation would allow you to do that a little more quickly, maybe without like getting disconnected when you're trying to enter in something. So it's not just coming into the site; it's also going downloading as well as uploading as well as downloading, I guess.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And different locations require different solutions. We touched on this a bit. So traditionally, the wireless industry deployed macro cell towers, and macro cell towers are roughly 50 feet in height, if not taller, and they're able to support multiple carriers. Each carrier is typically permitted for up to 12 antennas with a number of radios and cabinets on the ground. These cover several miles, and so this provides the larger umbrella where you see that you have full bar coverage on your cell phone. But what it doesn't take into account is cities, peaks and valleys, and so there's areas where that signal is not able to reach the intended user, and so that's where small cells come in. So we're able to deploy the small cells to reach the areas that the macro cell tower is unable to reach, and also to complement the existing macro tower to ensure that there's sufficient capacity to support a community, in the time of need or whenever people are relying on the network. Also, small cell sites are lower powered and placed closer to the end user, whereas the macro cell site is higher powered and further away from users or residents.
Would the macro sites continue to be utilized once the 5G rolls out? Because you need a special phone and things, right?
Right.
For 5G. So those would continue to be maintained and in play?
Yes, that is correct. So we would rely on the macro network to provide the larger umbrella of the network, and then there would be the small cell network, which is smaller umbrellas that are strategically placed throughout a community.
If you have a question, please step up to the podium so we can all hear your question.
I have a whole bunch of questions. I thought I'd break them out in parts. You mentioned a moment ago that you've been negotiating a contract or a deal with the city regarding your 5G proposal. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So could you explain for us what authority provides you or the city with that option to negotiate what is in essence a monopoly proposal? Because you could only have your relays or towers on a particular pole. So what do you understand to be that authority?
Well, Verizon Wireless is a telecommunications provider, and so they have the right under the FCC to attach their wireless equipment in the public right-of-way. And so the most recent FCC ruling authorizes wireless carriers to attach small cell wireless facility equipment onto city-owned assets. And cities are required to comply with federal law. And so our current position is that we're going to follow that federal law. And so we're willing to work with the jurisdiction to come up with something that'll be mutually beneficial to both the community as well as Verizon.
Well, I appreciate the argument on behalf of your company, but you've mentioned that it would be important for first responders. And one of the problems we found in Paradise with the Camp Fire is that all the cell reception went out. And one of the proposals was that they start cleaning up around their cell towers. We already have an ordinance in the city for maintaining a vegetation-free area, and it's now going to be proposed to expand to 100 feet around an area. Do you have any facility in the city limits where you've cleaned up vegetation 100 feet around from any of your facilities? Because up in the top of Sacramento Hill, that isn't the case. You haven't done it for years. Right up to your propane tank for that tower, you have no vegetation barrier. So if there were, we had a Paradise fire, that'd be a problem. So what do you propose to do to make sure we don't have a replication of that situation?
I would prefer to keep our discussion on the 5G network. I think you're getting into a much bigger topic about fire safety, and I would like to have that in a different forum.
Well, that's true, and it has to do.
So please keep your questions germane to the topic being presented tonight. Did you have any other questions about the presentation so far?
I'll bring them back. Thank you.
Please continue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's important to differentiate between 4G and 5G. I think we've already touched on this slightly. So 4G is the internet with apps as we know it. 5G, however, is the fifth generation wireless technology that will deliver enhanced mobile broadband capabilities that are up to 100 times faster than speeds today. And that's with immediate responsiveness. So 5G will be transmitted over higher wave frequency spectrum band known as millimeter wave. And higher frequency bands do not propagate well. They typically require line of sight and do not pass through obstacles. This is very similar to a remote control that controls your television. If you put an obstacle in front of it, then you will not be able to turn the TV on, or you will not be able to flip through the channels. And so it's important that with 5G and these small cells, we place them in areas where we have line of sight and there are no obstacles. So typically this is in the public right-of-way, away from large trees or buildings, and so they just need to be able to connect to 5G-enabled devices within the community or within the city. 5G or small cells will also require cell densification in locations such as lampposts and buildings and utility poles, and 5G will significantly increase speeds and provide real-time information. And so I guess an example that I like to use is most people use Google Maps to get around their communities, and often Google will tell you to turn left when you've already passed that street. And that happens to me all the time. And so with 5G, you would be alerted much sooner. So you would know that you could actually turn left and make that turn without having to go up ahead and flip a U and come back. So that would be one of the immediate benefits of 5G, at least to me.
Just a quick comment. You're talking about line of sight from this pole. Have they studied to know how many you're talking about within the city limits of Placerville?
I don't have the exact number for the small cells that we would be proposing, but generally speaking, it would be roughly a few hundred. And like I said earlier, it would be phased out, so we would come in with roughly 20 to 40, depending. It depends on the particular need in Placerville.
Have you installed small cell sites on a larger scale in a place like Placerville with a lot of trees, a lot of vegetation, things like that?
I'm sure that we have. We've deployed all over the U.S. It's not specific to here, but one example would be Sacramento, but I mean that's much larger. It's a bit larger city, but they're all over San Francisco. It's very hilly. They're in various jurisdictions.
But not specific with trees and like Placerville specific.
I would have to look that up and then get back to you, so I can certainly do that.
Yeah.
I just can't think of one particularly off the top of my head.
Yeah, no problem. Just when I was kind of researching, a lot of the cities that I looked at weren't really similar to Placerville, so I was curious if this technology would actually work here,
Yes.
with how we're situated.
Yeah, and it's because of the vegetation. Is that the?
Yeah, just the nature of the area.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So here we see some of the possibilities of 5G. So one of the possibilities of 5G is public safety technology, and such as collision avoidance sensors and hazard warning mechanisms that will alert you and other drivers of possible road hazards. So in the very near future, vehicle manufacturers will begin to embed their vehicles with sensors that will allow cars to communicate with one another. And so vehicles will travel very similar to a swarm of bees. And so as soon as one vehicle detects a potential road hazard, then it would begin alerting every other driver along that same route that there's a road hazard up ahead. And it would alert you to either brake or stop or pull off to the side of the road, and or it would potentially do that for you in order to avoid a collision. Another possibility is command and control technology, such as traffic management in the form of intelligent asphalt, and emergency management tools such as E911 drones. And so E911 drones could be deployed in the event of a fire, and so they would be able to deploy the drones in order to map the area and get a better sense of where the fire is at, and be able to relay information in real time back to the firefighters. Another 5G possibility is future transportation technologies such as autonomous vehicles and assisted or advanced driver assistance. And these 5G possible technologies would require dense transmission of data at a very low latency in order to perform as intended. And without a small cell network, these technologies will not be able to flourish. So that's why it's important to have the 5G network to ensure that these new technologies are able to be developed and deployed within cities all over the world. And here we see Verizon streetlight design options. I know these photos aren't the best, but I don't know if we can brighten up the screen, but the photo on the left is a 5G design, fixed 5G design that we deployed in the city of Sacramento. And the photo on the right is a 4G design in the city of San Francisco. The primary difference between the 4G and the 5G is that the 5G technology is smaller, and that's because the antenna and the radio are combined into a single unit rather than being separated out into separate units. So with the 4G design on the right, you can see that the antenna is up at the top of the light, and then there's two radios down the shaft of the pole. And with the 5G design, they're combined into a smaller unit just below that street light. And so as technology continues to evolve, then the equipment will become smaller and smaller. And so this is what we would be looking to deploy here, is something similar to this.
If the technology changes and the 5G cells continue to be developed and they change, would you come then remove all of the old ones and put up the new ones, or what we get in the beginning, if we were to have them, would be it?
Yeah, typically from my experience in being in the wireless industry is that the antenna and the equipment is constantly being changed out. So even though it's 5G technology, there's always new antennas that are released that allow you to do even more things than previously, and so they are regularly changed out. But it's important to note though. So we would still keep the 4G network and the 5G network until there's a point where we're completely phased out of 4G. But I don't imagine that happening anytime soon.
Right, yeah.
Everybody would have to switch over to a 5G compatible device, and we would be completely reliant on 5G, and we're just not there right now. So we would have 4G sites and we would have 5G sites, and it's quite possible that we would combine and do a 4G 5G combo. And so if we did a 4G 5G combo, then that would mean that we would occupy less streetlights on your rights of way.
Are 5G phones available right now?
Yes, so Verizon Wireless does have a 5G compatible phone,
Okay.
but you would need to live in Chicago or Minneapolis in order to be able to use it. Okay, so here we have Verizon decorative pole design options. So I drove around town and I saw that there are some decorative poles here, and so we would be interested in working with the city to come up with a design concept to attach to the decorative streetlights here, and we could work on an integrated pole design. So these are some examples of how we've worked with cities, and so you can't really tell that there's an antenna there or equipment, as it's all tucked into the inside of that particular pole there. And we would also be interested in attaching to traffic signals in the city. And so these are examples of traffic signals where we worked with a particular jurisdiction to be able to attach there and have it match their aesthetic. So the equipment on the photo on the left is painted brown to match. And so we would be interested in doing something similar here.
Sorry.
That's okay.
If, so say Verizon puts a small cell tower on one of our streetlights, say on the 50, and AT&T wants to come in, or any of the other companies, would they be able to, would that be limiting? Would they, you said like there's a certain amount they have to be away from each other.
Yeah, they require separation distance. I'm not specifically sure what the separation distance needs to be on a small cell, only because I don't believe that it's been done. But with a macro cell site, the larger towers, it has to be roughly 10 feet of separation, I believe, and that's because they're higher powered, there's more antennas, so it's possible that that separation may be less because these are lower powered and it's less antennas, but I don't know the specific separation distance, because to my knowledge, I don't believe it's been done yet.
Okay, so if you guys get a pole, it's kind of your pole right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the way it's currently being done, and there's companies out there that work with cities, and they go through, or even with cities, there's a reservation process, and so the carrier would come in and reserve the poles that they're interested in attaching to, and then if another carrier comes in, then they would not be able to attach to that particular pole, and then the initial carrier who reserves the pole has a certain amount of time before that pole is able to be given to somebody else if they don't do something with it.
And the number of installations that you would need is keyed to the number of customers you've got in the local area.
Yeah, and demand. So it would be based on existing customers that are residents, as well as visitors and businesses to Placerville.
Things that you anticipate use.
Yes.
Yeah, this past weekend, planning commissioners were involved in a workshop, and one of the speakers was from the Campfire area. Matter of fact, he was the director of planning for Butte County. And one of the things that he pointed out from the very beginning was that they lost cell service immediately. Okay. And my concern is if we're bringing this down to the local level, are we going to, as an example, if a certain section of Placerville loses power, therefore your poles in that section lose power, do we lose the use of our electronic equipment, or does it fall back to the larger towers?
Yeah, without the backup battery on the small cell sites, and so assuming those go down in the event of an emergency, then you would still have the macro cell site that is providing coverage to the town.
And the towers that are around here are battery backed up, is that correct?
Yes, the existing macro cell sites do have backup battery. That is correct.
Okay.
So you would still have that larger umbrella network that provides coverage today.
Right.
And so The small cells would enhance that network. So, hypothetically, if there was a fire here or a crisis and power went down, so you wouldn't have the small cell network in place, but you would still have the larger network or larger network umbrella in place that would be able to be relied on to contact your first responders.
Thank you.
Sorry. I know that you said that the way the industry is going, that the cell towers can't be shared. Is the technology allow for, say, a city to install their own small cell towers and lease them to the carriers, or is that not really an option? Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Like, could we put in small cell towers where we want them and then say, you can use them for X amount?
Well, so you would be, by entering into the agreement, we would be and leasing space from you.
Yeah, I guess I'm just looking at, especially within the sharing, because I'm thinking if Verizon goes and puts in several hundred of these, and then Sprint comes in and they want to put in several hundred of these, and suddenly we have however many small cell towers through the area. I guess maybe I just need to read more about the technology, if it would be potential to have them shared, or if we're just going to be blanketed in small
Yeah.
cell towers eventually.
I have heard about the shared design, but like I said, I don't know that it's been deployed yet. So it's still kind of, a concept that's being worked on. But it would be much taller than the existing streetlights that you have today, and that's because it would have to support multiple carriers. So I believe that when the equipment is available, and if it's something that the city would want, then we would be willing to work with the city to come up with that particular design. But we would also have to work with the other carriers, because I think it would just kind of get into negotiations and who would pay for what and how that would be
You
handled.
already do that somewhat when you have a 4G installation
On macro cell sites.
on macro cell sites.
Yeah,
right?
and
You
those are
negotiate.
those
space.
are owned by various carriers or yes.
So they follow the same format. It's just we're talking about a different technology.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it would be. I don't know how it
I
would
think
work.
you referenced earlier that these actually are kind of heavy, so you can't just put them all on a single light pole. If you have more than one, then
Right.
you have to make sure you have the structural integrity
That
to
is correct.
support them at a 10-foot distance or whatever is going to be required. So that it's going to take a little, engineering and design.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Please step up to the podium.
My name's David Price, and I just had a very simple question. Like, AT&T is obviously not negotiating, apparently, yet with the city. So will they have, well, I mean, if you come in and reserve what you want, then is that going to harm other companies coming in to get a good place to or a good position to put theirs? And then are we going to increase it where we have, rather than if you need 200, then AT&T need 200 and another company need 200, and we'll have a ton of these around? Or and then how is it most fair for all the companies? That's it.
So typically we would negotiate and work on a reservation process with city staff. And so we've done something similar in the city of Reno. And so carriers, we have carrier meetings with the city, and we're having open discussions. And once a carrier is ready to begin submitting their applications, and they begin submitting the applications, and then that begins the reservation process. And so we're all aware of the fact that cities are now accepting applications, and it's up to that particular carrier to determine when strategically is best for them to begin submitting and reserving poles. And so for Verizon Wireless, we're ready to begin moving forward. I can't speak for the other carriers. And so I would suggest that we negotiate or implement a reservation process here. if that's a concern.
So you said Verizon is ready to start rolling this out.
Yeah, we're
Soon.
ready to begin rolling out 4G and 5G small cells throughout the U.S.
Okay. Mr. Riva, or staff, have you had any inquiries from other carriers to do these small cell installations?
Yes, we've also been working with AT&T.
Because I'm kind of a physical kind of person, give me an idea on diameter and height of what you're looking at. We're talking probably a pole that is 4 to 5 inches in diameter. How much larger would this be, and how tall would it be? Do you have any?
I don't know. I don't have the exact dimensions, but there's a photo I showed here.
Yeah, yeah, but.
So the photo on the right, that is I believe that's a 4-foot antenna that's attached on top of that pole. And so we would deploy either a 4-foot antenna or a 2-foot antenna. And I believe that the antenna that we're looking to deploy here would be the 2-foot antenna, which would be smaller than this design.
Height-wise, 4 foot, how large a diameter are we looking? Ballpark, I mean, just
I believe it's 10 inches.
10 inches? Okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry, Barbara, do you have a question?
Well, this is to staff. Is AT&T going to make a presentation also?
AT&T is not asked to give a presentation.
Thank you.
So Verizon did, and we accepted it.
I had a question. So Verizon is proposing to do installations of both types that you showed in this picture that has Sacramento and San Francisco as examples?
We would begin with the 4G design, and then once we're ready to deploy the 5G, then we would transition to the 5G. But it's important to note that the 5G design that is shown here is a fixed 5G in Sacramento, and so it's not the commercial version of 5G. And so fixed 5G operates a little differently than commercial 5G. And so this is specific for 5G home. And 5G home provides it provides internet service as well as streaming services. And with the 5G commercial, then you would have the 5G capabilities on your mobile device. And so this is specific to home.
Any other questions from the public?
At some point, you expect to be coming back for the planning commission with a proposal, or is this strictly information today?
Today we're just here to provide information.
Is there any need in the future for you to seek review of any proposal in the future for your 5G services?
I believe we may still be working out what the process is going to be with the city as far as small cells.
Yeah, that's correct. Basically, tonight was just an opportunity to take advantage of Verizon's presentation, and this is a way for all of us to learn more about what is the difference between 4G and 5G. What does it mean? I mean, I was one of those folks that thought that 5G just meant greater amount of capacity or something, not that it was just the fifth generation. I didn't understand that until very recently. So I think this is a chance for the commission, the public, and staff to more become accustomed to what's being proposed here. But staff still will be working with both Verizon and AT&T with developing an ordinance, a city ordinance, and let me see if I get this term right, a master application agreement that we would then enter into with any of the carriers, where it's a more expedited process. If they meet the certain criteria that the city has established, then they can go ahead and locate on a particular pole, light standard, or public utility within the city right away.
My name's Dal Neely. I just wanted to ask, is the health potential or the environmental safety potential the same for the smaller units that you're going to put throughout town as they are for the units that you have that need a big clearance for safety reasons?
Yeah, so the small cell facilities are lower powered, and we still have to comply with FCC guidelines. And for every small cell site that we would propose, then we would perform an EME report, and that typically would be submitted to the jurisdiction for review at the time of encroachment permit application goes into the city for review. So you would have that information, and the EME reports would be cumulative, so it would pick up other small cell sites within a given radius, whether they are Verizon cell sites or some other carrier cell site. So you would be able to tell what the cumulative effect is, and when we've seen those, we still find that they're significantly lower than FCC standards.
Have there been EMU reports? Is that what you said?
EME, so it's electromagnetic emissions.
Okay. Have you guys had those out of Minneapolis or Chicago yet?
Yeah, we've had them, but we had to have them performed for the sites in Sacramento.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And then as well as our 4G sites. So we have 4G small cell sites throughout San Francisco, as well as other cities in Northern California.
Are they available publicly, or?
It would be, I believe they would be public record because they're part of the permit application process. So if you wanted to, technically, if anybody wanted to look them up, then they would be able to look up those reports through a particular jurisdiction's planning department or public works department through a record search.
My name is Laura Allright, thank you. Regarding the reports that are made by the engineer, how exact are they? Are they estimated? Are they like they go out and test them and know exactly what the frequency is? Because I live by a tower. What they said it was going to be and what my tester is not the same. Now I have 2, and it's even higher, and it's above 1.6. Thank you.
That may not be something you can speak to. You're not an engineer. You don't
no, but
produce those EME
right,
reports.
But what we've done in some jurisdictions, or what some jurisdictions have required, is that we provide them with post-installation EME reports, and so they're able to compare, what the EME report that was submitted prior to installation with post-installation report, and so you're able to tell whether or not we're operating within FCC guidelines. And in the event that we're not, then there would be repercussions to not operating with the FCC
Great.
standards.
Okay, that's good. We have some assurance of that. Any other questions? Please, come on up.
Who checks on that? Whether you're within FCC regulations, does the FCC actually come out and test your towers?
I don't believe.
I would think it'd be self-reporting, but
yeah, it is.
I
I believe
have
it
no
would be
idea.
self-reporting,
So you
and
would be monitoring yourself on this?
yeah, I know that internally at Verizon we do run our own reports, but we have an outside consultant that prepares reports for us, and so those reports are the ones that are submitted to the jurisdiction. It's not the ones that we prepare on our own, and so those reports just confirm what we've already found.
And do you supply these reports to the FCC?
We supply them to the city.
No, FCC.
I don't know if I have the answer to that.
Evelyn Veerkamp, Placerville. I have several seemingly unrelated points, but they all kind of boil down to the fact that I'm hugely concerned about these developments. My most significant concern is not, I accept that the benefits for communication, etc., are probably huge. But I will say straight out, I don't want any of this stuff anywhere around my house. And one thing I'm wondering is, it seems to me, in terms of the September FCC ruling that went into effect in January of this year, that cities, municipalities, jurisdictions are pretty much in a very weakened bargaining position, because it seems as though carriers can come in wherever they want, and the city then has to negotiate the terms. And it seems as though the best terms they can get is $270 per location. Now, that's not my huge concern. My concern really is that carriers seem to be able to come in wherever they want, and the city has to do the best they can with that information. If I'm wrong, please reassure me and tell me I'm wrong. If I'm wrong on that, or if I'm right on that, irrelevant, well, not irrelevant, excuse me. How about ordinary people, citizens who are not the city? When it comes to the locating of these facilities, will people like myself have any say over how close to our residences or businesses can these things be? Would I have the right to say, no, I don't want one in my backyard, front yard, or whatever? Or will I be as powerless, or even less powerful than the city, for example? Will ordinary people have any authority or bargaining power at all? So that is kind of a fundamental question. And the basic problem which I'm addressing has not in any way been touched on tonight. Well, at least not overtly, and that is health concerns. Can you cite any concrete scientific studies which tell you as the supplier, tell us as the recipients, what the health hazards are? I would love to know of a study which says you can do whatever you want and I, citizen, will not be jeopardized. If it turns out that our health is affected, and there are multiple examples of localities, schools, apartment complexes where cancer rates have gone up significantly and can be verified to have done so. It's not just random reporting. So if in the end the health of a community is significantly impacted, where does the responsibility lie? Who can be held accountable? Is the carrier accountable, or is the jurisdiction accountable because they agreed to allow you, well, they didn't agree to allow you to come in. They signed the contract whereby they determined how much money they were going to get out of the arrangement. So what protects us, and who's responsible? And are there any scientific studies that you can tell me about which will reassure me that a multiplicity of carriers coming in, or even a single carrier coming in and locating their equipment wherever they decide to locate it for best service, will not impact us? And what do we do if it does? And can I ask Pierre, I sent...
Could you please
shut up and sit down?
No, just wrap it up.
I will, I promise you.
One
I
or two
just wanted to
questions
ask
we can
Pierre,
answer.
Can I submit a document for public record, or do you not take them at these meetings?
You're more than welcome to submit any written materials you like at the meeting.
Thank you. It's the
We
same,
did get an email from
Yes.
you. Copies of that were distributed to each of the commissioners.
Will that be part of the
And they
public
were
record?
provided also to Verizon.
Thank you
and
very
they're-
much.
And they're in
Thanks
the
a
record.
million.
Thank you.
I hope you didn't take that. I just don't want to, give one person more time than other people have been allowed to speak. And thank you very much for your comments. Did you want to address any of the points about possible health impacts? I don't know if you have any data with you tonight.
No, I don't. I did bring a one-page informative document from CTIA, and I left those over in the back of the room on the table, and so that would direct you to places where you would be able to get more information on possible health risks with small cell wireless facilities, 4G and 5G technology. So that's in the back if you would like to take a copy. And then as far as attaching, I believe it's under Section 7901 of the CPUC. Verizon Wireless is a telephone corporation, and so they have the right to attach wireless facilities in the public right-of-way. But With that said, we're still interested in working with the community, and so we're trying to we're interested in making this positive. So, we're not looking to place it right outside of your living room window. We would, prefer to put them in between parcels or at the corner. But there are times that that might be the only option. And so when that is the only option, then perhaps we can work with the city and install our own pole so that it's not, sitting right outside of your home. So that's something that we could potentially work with the city on.
Just wanted a little clarification. The FCC, the resolution that we have, that we're considering this as part of the 5G, we are talking about public rights-of-way installation and municipally owned structures, light poles, traffic lights, not on private property. That would be, that could be negotiated, or can you clarify that a little bit for us?
That is correct. We're only dealing with public rights-of-way. So if a carrier wanted to locate, such as they do with the macro towers, most of them are on private property, and they have negotiated a long-term lease to construct a tower on that private property. But in this case, all we're basically looking at, staff is looking at how we go about doing the processing, the permitting of these small cell devices within poles, utility poles, located within a public right-of-way, city public right-of-way.
And
So we're not talking
utility
about
poles, we've
Caltrans
seen
either.
several pictures, and that's pretty much the standard installation we're talking about, or light poles, that kind of thing.
That's correct.
Any other questions?
If I may hand out some information. I've got a series of issues that the city has signed.
Do you have a do we need to have this, okay. Do you have this at the city?
I've got information that you might be interested in about what other cities are doing. And we find that Nevada cities, South Valley, Burbank, and a number of other cities have taken the opportunity to step up their protection of the public. And you've mentioned the federal government's paperwork on 7901 that does give you guys the right to do that, except for the fact that if it income exists. Okay? And that means if it affects our state of being, our well-being, if it harasses us, if it allows us to not be able to be outside and be listening to the quiet that we all cherish around here. We all came up here for a reason, and that was a lot of us to get away from the city and the noise and the pollution that goes on sometimes in the cities. You'll see in there that the different cities have enacted different steps to protect the people by having a series of 3 different permits for different applications. You'll find that there is a major difference between the 4G and the 5G. One is a radio frequency wave, the other one is a millimeter microwave. It's a microwave without a box around it to protect us. So you can imagine what it'll do to living life. We have in that paperwork, there's stapled in, there's 180 top scientists throughout the world that have proven peer-reported reviews that show that there is danger because of the cells. So you can read about that, and that gives a list of the scientists and what they studied. So you might find that you have the authority to restrict some of the placement of the cell towers depending on aesthetics or historical places. These things are relevant, especially in Placerville, with our heritage around here. You can see in some of the pictures that its towers can be right next to your bedroom window. If you're gonna, they project that the towers are going to be every 10 to 20th house. So if it's every 10th house, and they can put them up, and then AT&T has to put them on different poles, and Sprint, and Nextel, any of them, you know, whoever wants to put them on it, pretty soon it'll be on every telephone pole around. Now, I worked for the phone company for 30 years. I realize that there's a lot of dangers to radiation. This may be a situation that you might want to address, because it takes not only Verizon, but if you guys okay this without any protection for the public, you guys might be liable. It's just like somebody robbing a bank, and the guy that drives the car, the getaway car, just as guilty. So we have an opportunity to protect our city and the people here, and we sure hope that you guys do it. You can make some of the rules, and you can adjust it accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your effort putting this together. Would you mind stating your name again?
Randy Helsvig.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and on one thing, that you're going to put them on telephone poles. We had a large group of people move up here in 72, 73, 74, and some of those telephone poles did not get dipped in the herbicide and pesticide long enough, and they're hollow. And when you put a heavy weight up there, they have fallen, and they will cause a problem when they fall. And if you have one of these in front of your house, it's going to affect your real estate and your ability to sell. So feel free to make the decision any way you want. Thank you much for your time.
Any other comments or questions for our presenter?
Just to follow up on what he said and she said, if you look up the Americans with Disabilities Act and you look up EMF or electromagnetic sensitivity, you will find that it is a disability. If it didn't cause any health effects, it would not be categorically included.
Any other comments?
Madam Chair, I do have, it's not questions, because I've asked questions already. My question for you is this the best procedure to go about for being informed? Do we start off by having major corporations, two of the largest in the world, everybody but Huawei, to come in and talk about 5G? Or are you going to go out and make and affirmatively solicit information? Right now, the Board of Supervisors has been looking at the same issue. Because it's important to all of us, we need to increase our wireless communication throughout this rural area. And so we're only hearing from two large corporations, but what about CalNet, a local company that does respond to first responders for providing, for example, those towers, those mini towers that are atop of CNH Motor Parts and the one that is atop to the Mustard and Cutcher buildings. And they also have a mini tower on top of Sacramento Hill to provide for the Placerville Police Department. They tell me that they have a third option for increasing cell phone reception. And none of us here have that kind of expertise to question a third option within 4G to 5G. So why is it we're talking about, I mean, I think that would be a better approach, because the questions I raised earlier are frankly the same things that Mr. Lent raised that I learned from hearing someone from Paradise talk about the Camp Fire. And fires go uphill. And where are those towers? Uphill. They got wiped out. The reception was dead. So it looks like to us, it's a sales pitch. And a very unusual one, because they share the dais to make these what sounds like slogans, like we're going to increase service and we're going to help first responders, but we haven't heard anything about safety, like making sure you're free of vegetation in the area, and that would be relevant to making sure that those slogans are materialized. I think what I would recommend to you is that you actually advertise. Advertise that you're interested in learning about increased cell phone reception and wireless communication in this town and see what you get, rather than just two of the world's largest corporations to come in and give what amounts to a sales pitch. I think it would look better because it would look like independence, and instead of being fed what's already been a discussion and negotiation behind the scenes. That concerns me. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, what we have before us tonight is, I'm just going to respond to his comments. Just what we have, rather than, it's not so much an advertisement as this is in support of the resolution of intent and some business that has taken place at the city council level. So that's the scope of tonight's meeting. Yeah, before I close this session, are there any other comments from the audience or from the commissioners? Okay, thank you all for coming out tonight, and I appreciate you for giving us an excellent presentation and addressing our concerns as best you were able. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on, let's see. Item 6 is environmental assessments and public hearings. We don't have anything under that topic. Anything from staff on that?
No.
And item 7, no continued items
Nope.
from the previous meetings. Item 8 is new business, and under new business we had election of officers for 2019 and a review of the bylaws. Both of those items require that all commissioners be present, and we are only a group of 4 tonight, so we will continue that to the next meeting or a date certain.
Staff will bring those back when it's expected that all 5 are going to be present.
Thank you very
How
much.
about that?
Keep us,
Absolutely.
keep us on our toes with that. We'll be ready at a moment's notice. Are there other matters from commissioners for the staff? Okay, and anything for us from the staff?
Yes, we will have an agenda for June the 4th. And so at this point, I don't expect any absences, so we can put those items that we've just continued to that June 4th meeting. Yeah, it's just one public hearing item.
Anything else? Okay. Seeing nothing before us, I adjourn the meeting. It's 7:14. Thank you very much.